Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. I will be walking you through the front line and talking about a couple of little things. Just to note that I might have intentions of splitting my channel. I know that I do my philosophy stuff and I do the geopolitical war in Ukraine stuff at the moment. I don't know whether the algorithms are getting affected for each kind of content that I have. But of course, if I start a new channel for the geopolitical stuff, then I have to start afresh. And that's a bit of a problem. I'd have no subscribers, it wouldn't be monetized, all that kind of stuff. So I'm playing around with ideas of how to do that. Anyway, keep your eyes peeled and let me know what you think in the comments. So what has been happening? Well, quite a bit up in the Oskil area. So just to remind those who might only be joining for the first time today, here's your map of Ukraine. We've got Kherson as a region that has been sort of isolated in terms of supplies as the Ukrainians have hit supply routes along the Dnipro River. We have the southern region with the Zaporizhzhia front, and we have the Donetsk front line going up into Luhansk, and now we have this Oskil River front here. And it is around Lyman that we are seeing quite a bit of movement over the last couple of days, and around Kupyansk. This is really important because it's all about the railways. For the Russian army, it's all about getting railways. So Svatove is an important location, not so much for the railway now because it's kind of been cut off from Kupyansk, but there is, one wonders whether they're going to go as far north to hit this town up here to stop the railway going further south, or whether Starobilsk is the objective. The problem is they've not got a lot of time left before the mobilized troops start hitting the front line. So really they want to get as much as they can in the next week or so. And I don't think they'll be able to get much further than this river down here, than the Svatove to Kremina road and railway link. But we shall see. There is a bit of movement going on up in Kupyansk, so let's go and have a look at that. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. So as you can see in Kupyansk, there is, and this is from War Mapper, this map, there is some movement eastwards and southwards, and actually there's a little bit of movement north of there as well. Down near Lyman, we've got lots of activity going on, and we've got an increase in the bridgehead that has been formed by the Ukrainians crossing the Oskil River. There hasn't been much movement on this tiny little pocket of Russian resistance, and I'll get onto that. But let's start from the north. And this is what the ISW map looks like. It's somewhat zoomed out. You can see the bridgehead is increasing from Izium and from the Oskil River and from Oskil itself. We are going to go and start sort of up here. So just let's get our bearings straight. So we have the Oskil River, we have Izium, and we have Lyman, we have Severodonetsk, Kremina, Lysychansk, Rubizhne, all around there. Okay, let's go up the Oskil River. We're going to go past Borova and to Kupyansk. That has been fully taken in terms of the city that's split in two over the river. Originally, the Ukrainians only had the eastern area. Now they have the east and west of Kupyansk. And it's all about battling for these not quite suburbs, but sort of little towns and cities little towns and villages on the outskirts of Kupyansk. But we go slightly further north, we have the scenario from up here where Horobivka was liberated, and we have Tavlzhanka, which is also being fought over. So what the Ukrainians have done is they've kind of skirted around Lyman Pershi, and they are attacking Sinkivka here. So there is a sort of line that goes around there before it pops back in here. And I'll zoom in because I've done a little map there, but just to let you know that there are movements up here. I don't know why they've left this area, but they've probably found a path of weakest resistance, which is to attack Sinkivka. So there's movement going on north of Kupyansk. Then as we get into Kupyansk itself, there is movement going further south. Let me bring you onto my map that I have done of Kupyansk. So here we have Kujurivka has been liberated, Podoli, and down here Kishkarivka. Kurilivka over here is being contested, but there's broadly your line down there, and these areas are being incrementally liberated by Ukraine. But these things aren't easy when you are fighting over urban territory. As soon as you start getting out into this area where you've got basically farmland. So this is Kupyansk, but what can be said about basically the whole of the Luhansk area here is it's not even industrially useful. There's not that much industry going on until you get down here, and most of that's been blown up. Izium was very important. It used to make a lot of arms for Ukraine, and when that was lost to the Russians, that was a big loss for the Ukrainians. There's the Stugna factory there that makes their anti-tank missiles, or sort of anti-tank rocket launchers that have been so brilliant in the conflict. You hear a lot about Javelin. These shoulder-held ones, well, actually, the Stugna, which are set up on a tripod and have two men to operate them, have been devastating, really, really useful. But anyway, all of this here is broadly agricultural land. So as soon as you start getting past the towns and villages, it's really easy going as far as marching on to the next place. So as you can see, really agricultural area there. So that's what's going on in that area of Kupyansk. Further down, we move down to Borovar and get down to a place near our particular focus at the moment, which is Lyman, and we have Podlyman. Now, the Ukrainians have taken Podlyman, I think, and there's sort of don't hold this. They don't hold Vichy Solone. So they've literally gone around the river and taken a place there. They do hold Pisky Radkivsky, which the Ukrainians hold that. Okay, well, let's go and look at what's going on around here. You will remember, hopefully you'll remember from yesterday, Lyman is where it's all at. There's fighting over Drobysheve, which there still is, and Shandrila Holove. And really, Yampil and fourth place of Torske, where here it is, Torske. So I will now show you my rubbish little map of the area. So I'm just going to go back up to what we had before, so Borova and the larger picture. So this was the pocket of Russian resistance. That is broadly the same. Where the Ukrainians have made some gains are in this slightly northern area of this salient, of this bridgehead, and they've gone round to Podlyman. And I think they're fighting over that. I don't know whether it is liberated yet, but that's certainly where it's at. And just north here, sort of a couple of villages taken back by the Ukrainians. So there is movement. And they have been reinforced here along these lines. So there's a bit of reinforcement coming in from further to the east and the southeast. There is some tough Russian resistance around here, Drobysheve and Shandri Holove, and particularly that line around there. So if we now zoom in a little bit more, okay, let's get our bearings. So we've got Kremina, we've got this area of forest here, Bilarivka and Yampil. So Yampil is pretty key at the moment, and that holding out means that Lyman can't be, more effectively encircled. It is encircled almost. There's just this road out there, but that will be under fire control to some extent. The Ukrainians will be able to hit that road. So it's not an easy route into or out of Lyman. There's about 3,000 Russian troops here, I think, as far as I can gather, and about 3,000 Ukrainian troops on fighting against them. So actually, it is what the Ukrainians don't really want to do. And in fact, one source has said that Ukrainians have stopped attacking down here, and they're really waiting for the encircled, for the forces flanking to do their job. Another source says they are continuing to attack here, so I don't know. Who do you believe? But Drobysheve is being particularly difficult, and Shandrila Holove here. It is, you would think, just a matter of time, Let's have a look at so that's the map that I've drawn on. Now let's look at the terrain map. It's about amassing their forces in the forests where there is some degree of protection and then launching from there. You've got these cities and conurbation sort of working down there, but you have this pocket of Russian resistance here that is still holding out. Whether there will be a breakthrough today is anyone's guess. But that's where it's at. There has been some movement. The one just feels an inevitability to what is going on here. Okay, let's now look a little bit further afield as we go down into the Bakhmut, the northern sort of Donetsk and southern Luhansk region. We have still contested areas. Spirne is being fought over here. You do have some back and forth between both the Russian and Ukrainians. There are some villages that are taken, some villages that are being liberated. It's all happening here, although it's quite attritional. Where it's a little bit quieter, maybe, is down here in this area, where again the rumors are still that the Ukrainians are amassing a force. There are some little pockets of villages being contested and taken and what have you. The Ukrainians making a tiny bit of progress in a couple of little areas around here, but basically not an awful lot of change. Some people are getting sort of a bit perturbed, maybe that not much is happening in terms of territorial progress in Kherson. And in fact, the Russians took back a couple of villages in this Davidi Breed salient here. So the artillery is working, and I think actually Russian air support is kind of hammering troops around here so that the Ukrainians pulled back somewhat to the Inhulets River again, but these sort of villages are empty. There's no one living there. It's just a complete war zone. It is again a question of whether this is just Ukraine not wanting to lose troops, but wanting to starve out the Russians of their supplies. And they are continuing, as I said, for the last 2 or 3 days to hit these supply routes. They're still doing that. So not a lot of change. There is partisan activity going on Melitopol. Let's have a little look. So who was here? We have photos of the car, the collaborator, which was attacked by Ukraine's resistance in occupied Melitopol. So this is head of education in Russia. There's an awful lot of propaganda in terms of education in Ukraine, in occupied Ukraine, where the Russians are trying to get all the children to be taught Russian history, really biased, propagandistic history. And a lot of people are not happy with the collaborators who are helping to enforce this kind of brainwashing, essentially. So if we, so I've already shown you that. There's just another map of up near Kupyansk. So no point in looking at that. What other things can we say? Well, good news, and I did mention this yesterday, but US will announce various new counter-drone systems in its $1.1 billion military aid package to Ukraine. Lots of stuff coming. HIMARS, about 18 HIMARS, a whole bunch of NASAMS, which are surface-to-air missile systems, and that's what you need, because there were Russians claimed they shot down a Ukrainian Su-24 jet about 60 kilometers from the front line. Now, if that's the case, it means that the Ukrainians don't have their own surface-to-air defense here. So if that was shot down by a missile from a system over here, then that missile could itself be shot down. But there is a lack of surface-to-air capability, which is what in the Ukrainian armed forces, which is what the US are seeking, and allies, NATO allies, are seeking to change. They really need to get the air defense systems working effectively, because the Russians, it's not about necessarily taking out the Russian Air Force, but it is big time about hitting cruise missiles. Dnipro, I think, has been hit a lot overnight, and I know a bunch of the missiles were shot down, but when you're sending 6 missiles, it only takes a couple of missiles to get through for there to be all hell let loose. These are it's not nice. So Kryvyi Rih as well, under sustained missile attack, they are upping the ante. The Russians in terms of their sort of nightly attacks. What else do we have to say? Some official Ukrainian claims that completely untrained Russian conscripts are arriving at the front. So again, this is just further evidence, if you like, or continued claims that the conscripts are just not being trained and being sent to the front. And I've heard that some of them been getting there on foot. It's just it's not looking good for those mobilized troops, but they are still bodies on the ground, and they will help to bolster either the Russian defense or the Russian attack. So a Ukraine official has said that they are negotiating with Russia over the possible return of all prisoners of war. That will be massive. That would be a real bonus for both sides. But I guess if you've got, say, 2,000 prisoners of war and the opposition's got 2,000 prisoners of war, if you're looking at yourself, you're thinking, we have to have troops looking after these. We have to feed them. The Russians are doing a pretty good job of adhering to the Geneva Convention, but it takes up a lot of resources to look after and process all these prisoners of war. If you can swap them back for equivalent prisoners of war, then that is a bonus to you, as well as being a bonus to the other side. But it's a kind of zero-sum game. So there you go. I guess that would make sense for both sides to go through with that. Again, Russia is attacking Ukraine with missiles. Again, this is what I said. Kryvyi Rih, significant damage reported. 5, these are cruise missiles, Kh-59s, were fired from a Su-35 aircraft. Now, these have quite a long range, so it's not like... So if Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih are being hit by cruise missiles, it's not like planes are flying over and then shooting missiles down, because those planes will be shot down by the air defenses that are there. I mean, these can be shot they'll take off maybe from inside Russia. Okay, they'll take off inside Russia and shoot them from here, and those missiles will have the range to be able to get to the intended targets. So even though they are shot from Russian aircraft, it doesn't mean that those Russian aircraft are particularly in danger of being taken out themselves. Here we see 4 of the 5 missiles fired at Dnipro were taken out. So that's good, but still, damage is happening, and there's plenty of video evidence that these are causing problems. Okay, we talked about the 3 leaks on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines that go under the sea by Denmark. There's now a 4th leak, supposedly, and there's so much work being done by everyone to assign blame and to work out how it happened. Some people think submarines. Some people think frogmen. Scuba divers. It's at the limit of the depth. It's not particularly deep in the country, in the sea where that's happening. Let's see if I can find the Nord Stream picture I've got of that. I might not have that anymore. But it's... So here we go. The Nord Stream pipelines, both of them there, 1 and 2. 2 is yellow. 1 is turquoise. Not that it really matters for the point of what I'm saying, but there three leaks had been found over the last few days. Now there's a 4th potentially, but they're in international waters, or at least the pipeline is not owned by anyone other than Gazprom. Question is who's done this? So as I was saying, this isn't particularly deep here, but it is at the limits of human diving capability. The question is it submarine? Is it warships dropping something? Are there people placing explosives on the pipeline? Could it be a yacht just passing by with stuff on board, going undercover and dropping something? my opinion would be likelihood is dropping underwater charges that will detonate, and the way that underwater charges detonate is very different to on land, and there's far more devastation if you blow something up to the stuff that's underneath it. So you can actually drop charges, you can blow up above the pipeline, and it will absolutely cause devastation. And the question is, who's doing what? There is some evidence or some theories to suggest that the Americans could be doing this to stop Russia being able to blackmail Europe by turning off on the gas, so it just gets Europe off that and onto energy independence, and it takes away from Russia the ability to blackmail Europe into submission in some sense. So because they can no longer turn it off and on, you don't worry about it. Right, that's it. So Russia then have a lack of tools to try and seek dominance over Europe. Or there are actually more people that think it's Russia doing that as a way of showing their dominance and say, right, you can't have our fuel, our energy. So I don't know is the answer. Who knows? So there you go. What else do I have to say? Lots of European countries, and this is really important, yet we don't know exactly why, but lots of European countries have told their citizens to get out of Russia imminently, immediately. And America have just said this as well. The question is why they've done this. Is this because everyone, behind the scenes, things are happening? There's stuff happening, and behind the scenes, there's a thought that this could go to all-out war and an escalation. And if it's all-out war, you want all of your population out of Russia. Or is it because there's thoughts that Russia are going to close their borders due to the mobilization legislation that they introduced, and all the Russian men trying to leave Russia? So they're going to close their borders, in which case you guys need to get out because you don't know what's going to happen. If they're going to close the borders, you won't be able to get out, so you need to get out now. Which one of those two options? I don't know, but it's certainly a sign, not a good sign as far as going forward geopolitically. There's also evidence that Belarus are making their forces, conflict ready, and they're doing inspections. So are they getting ready to get involved? And are we seeing just a general escalation of the whole conflict, as we were worried originally that Belarus were going to get involved? And then Lukashenko has been fairly canny in trying to appease Putin, but actually really saying, no, I'm not going to get involved because actually none of my forces really want to. My population isn't crazy behind it, and it's going to cause international backlash. But then has his hand been forced by Putin? So there you go. As far as the four regions are concerned, I said that two of the region governors have gone over to Russia to ratify the absolute sham, ridiculous referenda that are taking place. I think all four of at least the Russian appointees are over there, and I think there's going to be some kind of meetings going on 3rd and 4th of October, and likely a statement on the 5th as to what the future of these is. It'll be like an official annexation of these. As far as Zaporizhzhia is concerned, it appears that there could be a separate referendum of the rest of the Zaporizhzhia region. So if you look at Zaporizhzhia Oblast, remember, is a sort of region, a county, a state. So this is the Zaporizhzhia Oblast here. And it is, at the moment, what was that? Maybe 2/3 under occupation. What they're saying is, Russia are saying, we will take the rest of this. And when we take the rest of this, we'll give a further referendum for the rest of this, because we understand that you weren't involved in this referendum for the Zaporizhzhia region. So it's not quite fair, understandably, that, that's very gallant of you, very magnanimous of you, Russia. So we will have a further referendum to rubber stamp the annexation of the entirety of the Zaporizhzhia region. Okay, a couple of other things just to run through. A few nuggets. I hope you don't mind me giving you these nuggets. You may already know all of this, but if you don't, hopefully this is useful. Let me know if you appreciate this. So I'm going to just run through one of my favorite channels, Ukraine Weapons Tracker. There's about 3 things I just want to show. First of all, is this a particular number? So this is an improvised munition being dropped from a drone. You see a lot of this at the moment, which is using often commercial drones to drop improvised or innovated munitions like hand grenades, that the triggers have been adapted so that you can drop them from a drone. So this is not only that I'm going to show you, but also that there's one single little hand grenade there, or maybe a mortar round, and eventually that's the end of that tank. But what I want to talk about is look at the field around that, the pockmarked field, and this is what you see all over. Ukraine is one of the breadbaskets of the world, covered in the east a lot in agricultural fields. So many of these fields have been ruined in terms of like the artillery and mortar shells that have decimated these fields, and the burnt out wreckages of vehicles. And there have been a few reports on the ecological catastrophe that this war represents. It's not just terrible for human life and in terms of human suffering, but in terms of ecological suffering on a long-term basis. And this is a real challenge, a real sadness, an extra sadness of this war. So there, anyway, that's the improvised weapon being dropped. I just want to talk to you about, next one is about why people have bright armbands and headbands when they're supposed to be camouflaged. The Ukrainians have blue, yellow, and I think green as well, really bright, and the Russians will use red and white. Why do they do that? And why do the Russians paint massive letters, Z, O, or V, on their, which tell you kind of where they're from, on their vehicles? Why do the Ukrainians often put flags, big flags on their vehicles, or paint massive flags on them? And the answer is, the reason is because friendly fire is much more of a challenge than being seen, wanting to be camouflaged and being seen. In fact, we saw this from the Gulf Wars, that friendly fire is a real problem for any force. And so it's a bit of game theory going on here. If you're looking through your sights and you see at 150 meters, you see someone in army uniform, and you can't tell who they are, you're going to take them out, because it's game theory. Like, if I don't take them out, there's a chance that they can see me and take me out. So it's whoever gets in there first. It's the same with pieces of armament. Now, you've got to remember that the armament being used, the equipment the Russians have, is the same as the Ukrainians, and vice versa, because they've used the same stock of old Soviet and then Russian weaponry. And it's only now that NATO is providing a lot of stuff for the Ukrainians, but generally you can't tell from what they're driving necessarily what side they're on. And so you take out a tank because you think, oh, there's a T-72 tank, I'm going to blow that up. Oh, it's one of our own. Oh, I wish I'd known that. Okay, so we paint big things on them to communicate to our own guys that this is us, I'm with you, don't hit me. So the reason why they shout about who they are in terms of colours and flags and letters is about personal safety from blue on blue fire, friendly fire. Okay, last nugget is this. This is an Orlan 10 drone. This is a reconnaissance drone. This is cheap as chips. It's so cheap that, in fact, the fuel, it's a petrol-driven one, is a water bottle that they fill with petrol. The reconnaissance is done by an off-the-shelf DSLR Canon camera. Often you see it like basically taped in there and pointing out the bottom, and the button to stop it auto turning off, they have a mechanism. They basically tape down the button effectively so that it doesn't auto turn off. Sometimes these are really cheap to make, although they're struggling to make them. There are a few components they can't get hold of because of the sanctions. We know that they're struggling to get enough of these because they're drafting in ones that are used by the emergency services to look over forest fires, and you're seeing them on the front lines now. So they know they must be desperate to some degree. But these are cheap as chips, and they've got shed loads of them. They are embedded in every unit, and they have a much more, much better capability and capacity for this low-tech reconnaissance that allows them to do, artillery correction or reconnaissance just in general for intelligence, and so on and so forth. And these can also fly further and higher because they don't freeze. They're more resistant to the cold. In fact, there are stories of these dropping out the sky. Russians have lost control of them. They keep flying and they drop out the sky in the middle after they run out of fuel in the middle of Poland and Slovakia and whatnot. So these are cheap and cheerful, but they are very useful for the Russians, and they've used them really effectively. The question is, I mean, this one's fallen out of the sky, which means he's used electronic warfare he's pointed some kind of gadget at the thing that makes it just stop working, fall out of the sky. But quite often you see these taken out of the sky by man-pads, Stinger or Martlet rockets that cost maybe, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 for the rocket, or actual surface-to-air defense mechanisms, S-300s or captured Panzer or whatever. These rockets that are sent up, and you're thinking, wow, that costs huge amount of money to send up. And you get a lot of people on Twitter saying, what a waste of money. They're using these expensive rockets to hit down this cheap as chips, ridiculously rubbish Orlan reconnaissance drone. Well, no, because what you need to look at is what this is doing. So it is facilitating the artillery fire on, say, a column of vehicles or a battery of artillery that costs, I don't know, $3 million. That $3 million of stuff and people get taken out because of the facilitation of this item. So this is the eyes of the forces correcting fire or giving intelligence that's taking out and costing the Ukrainians $3 million. So if you're going to fire like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 rocket, $100,000 rocket at this thing to take it out, yes, this doesn't cost that much to make, but the damage it's causing costs that much. So therefore, you are degrading the capability of the Russians, and you are saving potentially that much money in saving your own forces. So that's why you would hit these, and it's a completely asymmetrical, evaluation in terms of what this is worth and what the rocket is worth. But actually, it's about what that rocket, what that Orlan 10 and the Orlan 30 facilitate. Anyway, thought that might be useful. Please like, subscribe, share, do all those things. You can join the channel, or you can give thanks in other ways. It's all down below. Always appreciated. As I say, hoping maybe to turn this into 2 channels, but then I'd have to start the second channel from again. You need 1,000 subscribers, 4,000 hours of watch time to make it, to monetize it. So I don't know how to do that. Maybe release videos on both channels and then eventually stop on the first one once the second channel is up to speed. But again, this needs to be monetized, because otherwise I spend an awful lot of time doing this. So it needs to be worthwhile. And it's just wondering how to do that. If any of you guys know about splitting a YouTube channel and how to do that effectively, please let me know, and give your thoughts, or maybe you like it all together. But I think it just may mess with the algorithm. So some of these videos do really well, and my philosophical ones less so, because the audience is slightly smaller for that, and the algorithms can't handle the 2 different types of content, and so it may impinge the philosophical stuff from being able to do as well as it can. So I don't know. Let me know. I'm no YouTube expert. I'm an amateur, but there you go. That's me. Thanks for your support. Till tomorrow. Goodbye.